Hello and good evening and afternoon and morning to everybody. It's wonderful to be here with all of you, at least virtually, for this webinar sponsored by the South to South Learning Network. My name is Chris Jones and I'm a senior associate with Man Global Health. And I work hand in hand with the SSLN team in support of prevention and condom programming. It's great to see so many friends and colleagues from around the world joining this discussion. So I can see your introductions. Please keep them coming. Today, we're focusing our discussion on market intelligence and specifically innovative approaches to monitoring and managing condom programs. But first, a bit of context to set the stage. As funding for prevention is pressured by obligations to support growing treatment programs, we are also seeing a growing number of viable prevention interventions, products, and services compete for scarce prevention resources. While interventions such as PrEP and VMMC, condoms, and soon long-acting PrEP such as CAB-LA and the Prevent Ring enter the prevention market and offer users the choice they need to protect themselves, we are not seeing absolute funding for HIV prevention funding increase. Condom programming specifically is now a smaller piece of a smaller HIV prevention pie. This happens just as governments and funders of programs demand increasing levels of accountability to programs to understand the impact demonstrated through improvements in behaviors or project outcomes and outputs of their investments. To maximize the impact of that investment, quality data supporting insights, analysis, and program monitoring to improve the quality of decision-making is now more important than ever. So we've designed today's discussion around 4 core presentations to discuss a combination of tried and true and innovative approaches to provide the data condom programs require to make good decisions. First, Kim Longfield from databoom will set the stage for global best practice market intelligence work in support of condom programs. She will outline what quality market intelligence is, why it matters, and outline traditional and innovative approaches to ensure your program is tracking the 4 critical elements of condom programming. That is condom use and need, demand, supply, and finally, sustainability. But our next three presentations through high and low technology approaches are exploring innovative ways to explore condom programming. Georgie Midgley from M4Jam is going to share their experience with using crowdsourcing as an effective and efficient method to track condom access through lessons generated from a global fund pilot. Japheth Kioko from the national program in Kenya will highlight how they've been utilizing polling booth surveys with key populations in the last 4 years to monitor condom use, a very low technology approach to understanding how a program is doing. And finally, Josey Kachiza from World Vision in Malawi will discuss how they've applied this methodology to their AGYW programs. We hope that there will be a little something for everybody, and through either an inspiration or through direct application, you'll be able to take some of these innovative or well-tested approaches to your program. So a bit of logistics, please, if you haven't done so already, introduce yourself in the chat box. Please include your questions in the chat. We will, after the presentations, include, we hope, at least 20 minutes, if not more, to answer some of those questions by our panelists. And also remember that presentations and resources will be made available following this presentation, including the work of Kim Longfield, who's identified a number of resources that might be of interest to you all. So on to our panel. First, Kim Longfield, who was unable to call in during this time and has since pre-recorded herself, will kick off this webinar by laying the context of this work. Kim brings more than 25 years of experience in research and development. She is the founder of databoom, a research and communication agency that believes powerful insights can shape the world. Kim partners with organizations to improve stakeholder engagement and develop strategic communications backed by evidence. So on to a pre-recorded presentation by Kim in this setting of the stage for market intelligence to advance condom programs.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to your webinar. I'm really pleased to be here today. My name is Kim Longfield, and I am the owner and principal at databoom. And databoom is a research and communications agency And we provide strategic support to organizations and align measurement to the sorts of things that organizations want to achieve. We work with governments and donors, implementing organizations and others, and we often get asked about measuring the health of markets, and that's why I'm here today. So today's presentation is Market Intelligence Key Indicators for Condom Programs. And before we get started, just a couple of caveats. So the presentation is meant to be comprehensive but not exhaustive. We've put together a list of resources for you that we will share in the chat, and it's on Databoom's website under the resources page. But it's not exhaustive, so it doesn't include absolutely every resource that's out there. And you may know of others, and there are likely other things out there, but what we've tried to do is provide the best resources that we've found and that tend to help us and our clients. So the other caveat to keep in mind is that, you can't let the enemy be let perfect be the enemy of the good. Meaning that you don't have to have a perfect measurement program. You need to have measurement to inform the decisions that you're in a position to make, but at the same time, we have to be practical that sometimes, the data's not there, you can't afford to always collect it, it won't always be perfect. And so keep that in mind. This presentation isn't meant to be check the box on everything. We do, want to provide you with the resources so that you can inform your decision making as best as you can. But, we recognize that some evidence is better than no evidence, and more evidence is better than less. So anyway, let's get started. So market intelligence. What is market intelligence? This is just a definition that I put together based on resources I found online. And market intelligence is the practice of gathering, analyzing, and using data to inform decision-making and help market strengthening. And why is it important? Well, it's important because it helps you understand the state of the market, who the market is and isn't serving, and if investments are working, your investments, other people's investments in the market. And so the type of data we're interested in, we're going to go through each of these. We have 4 sets. There's need, demand, supply, and sustainability. So starting with need. Need is really about how many condoms are needed to protect high-risk sex acts. And this is about need-based planning. And I know that Hank presented to you about a year ago on this tool. And this helps you estimate the potential size of the market, not the actual size, but the potential size. So it helps you identify the quantities and funding required. It's called the Condom Needs Estimation Tool, or CNET. It generates estimates of total condom quantities and the funding that would be needed to achieve national targets, so your 90-90-90 sort of targets. It highlights the gap between current use and estimated needs to reach 90% use in high-risk acts. And it can help model a total market approach because it accounts for the public, the private, and the social marketing sector. It also allows you to disaggregate condom need by different populations, and I know you're interested in key populations, and so that is possible with this tool as well. This tool was developed jointly by UNFPA and UNAIDS to support countries in their efforts to develop and implement comprehensive condom programs in HIV, STIs, and it also includes estimates for unintended pregnancies. It sets up the estimator for 3 to 5 years of work, and it it helps you with the contribution of each of those different sectors of the market, right? So public, private, and socially marketed. And we'll provide you with the link in these slides and on the resource tool. Okay, so next is demand. And, we often talk about supply and demand when it comes to markets, and I've intentionally put demand ahead of supply. Because what we find is that a lot of organizations neglect demand and they hyper-focus on supply. And demand intelligence really helps us use evidence to target campaigns and understand patterns of condom use so you know where to intervene. And so one of the first things to do is understand which factors are associated with condom use. And this helps you with that audience segmentation, because what you really need to know is what are their needs, their motivations, and the things that influence their condom use. And you could gather this sort of intelligence in a few different ways. There are qualitative consumer insight studies. I used to work for PSI. I was the director of research and metrics for about 8 years. I worked for PSI for about 15 years. And we spent a lot of time on this, really understanding the consumer and trying to be client-centered. In the resources I provided, one of the best projects I worked on was Project Chitanga for Protector Plus condoms in Zimbabwe. And so I'm providing you with a resource on that one, and it's a nice description of some consumer insight they did with a private sector provider of research. So you could collect the data on your own, you could hire somebody else to do it. We used to also do something at PSI called focus studies, and those were qualitative insight studies, and I've provided you a link for some of those resources as well. You can also do quantitative surveys, and the most useful ones are the ones that identify factors that are associated with condom use, and then they use regression analysis to actually identify which of those are significantly associated with condom use. And I provided you a link with some of those as well. PSI's track surveys did that, and that was tracking use continuously and key indicators and understanding if we were actually changing the factors that influence use, and for different populations. We did it for general populations and we did it for key populations. And then something I think you're going to discuss later today is crowdsourcing. And this is a growing area for data collection, and a really interesting one as well, especially if you are low on resources. You're having a hard time collecting information in different places. If you really want to bring the user experience forward and in their own voice, this can be a great tool. And it's growing, so I don't think it's perfect yet, but a lot of people are doing interesting things in this space. One of the most interesting things that I've seen is Girl Effects, technology-enabled girl advocates. They're called TEGAs. They only have them in the countries where Girl Effect has programs, but the idea is that they train girls to collect data in their community and capture the results on cell phones. And most of the results are qualitative, but you could introduce a quantitative module in there if you wanted to integrate a survey. And Girl Effect does offer that service. They're trying to outsource it and offer it to other agencies so that they can collect data, and I'm providing you with a link for that. Other things that we've found in terms of crowdsourcing is that there are platforms. Often people provide a platform and you need to bring your team forward to collect the data. So there's lots of ways that you could do it. You could train up a group, you could bring your own team to do it, you could enable some sort of committee or somebody else to collect the data on the ground. So that's the insight, right? That's the deep, qualitative, mostly qualitative, but insight into why people do or don't use condoms and what could potentially shift them to use. Then you also want to understand what proportion of the population is actually using condoms. And this comes from population-based surveys. You know, you want to look at trends over time, and you want to be able to disaggregate condom use by type of partner, by age, by population. And then you often need targeted surveys for key pops. Some of the most common resources here are, of course, the DHS. You have the population-based HIV impact assessment surveys from Columbia University here in the US. They're PHIA surveys. Again, I provide the link for the track surveys that PSI has done. There's also a nice resource from IPOOM's Global Health Project, and it offers synthesized data from the DHS and from PMA. A lot of family planning stakeholders like to use that data, but you could probably use it for condoms for HIV prevention as well. And they've taken some of the more clunky interfaces from DHS and made them smoother and easier to use. And then you've got key population surveys, because we have generalizable surveys and then we have those for key pops. The most noteworthy of them are the IBBSS. So those are the Integrated Biobehavioral Surveillance Surveys. They were formerly known as the BSS surveys, but they are now available through this Blue Book resource. And they've been developed by the CDC and WHO under the PEPFAR program. And those are highly targeted, and they include like the methodology for sampling different key pops, which is I think the trickiest part. The other ways that you could understand what proportion of the population is using condoms is to model it. One of the frustrations of people is that these large surveys don't happen very often. They might happen annually, but it also takes a lot of work to analyze and interpret the results. But a lot of these also take place only every 5 years, maybe 3 years, and that just doesn't feel optimal for decision making. So some people use modeling, and the one nice resource for modeling is the commodity gap analysis that's available through the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition. Avenir does that analysis, and again, it's for family planning, but it does include condoms. And I think the back end of that modeling is the back end of that tool is a nice illustration of modeling in this space. You can also model from existing surveys by using more sort of fancy analysis strategies like structural equation modeling. It's called SEM, and that's where people impose a theoretical model on the survey data to see, if this is what condom use is like now, what would it be like in the future? And that's when you would need an analyst, a biostatistician, or somebody to model that going forward. And then I think later on in the webinar, you're going to have a presentation on polling booth surveys for key populations. And so this is really intended to decrease reporting bias and allow people to give more honest responses, because they tend to overestimate or overreport their condom use when they're face-to-face with an interviewer. And so this is a strategy where an interviewer will read or somebody will listen to a survey, and they will check off a response and put it in a jar or in a box so that it feels more confidential and discreet. So there's lots of different options here, but this is one I think that an indicator that people would like more routine feedback on, because it is so important. It is, what we're working toward. Other issues around demand that are important. How much are consumers willing to pay for condoms? Willingness to pay studies ask a series of questions about value and price sensitivity. And there are also experimental strategies like choice and bidding strategies that you go out into a community and you ask, how much would you pay? Would you pay this much? Would you pay this much more? And so those resources I've got available for you. You also, and this is a hard one, you'd like to ultimately know condom use by source of supply, and most surveys don't include this kind of information. I've provided a paper that we worked on in Myanmar where we actually did this. And this is important because you want to see who's sitting on your source of supply, because ultimately you don't want wealthy people sitting on subsidized or free products. You want to move them off to commercial products or some sort of payment scheme. And so, especially as you move up the TMA sort of ladder and try to graduate programs, this sort of thing can be really important. Related to that, you want to know if subsidies are targeting the right consumers. So this gets at an equity question. The distribution of condom users across wealth, geography, gender categories. For you, it might also be against key population or risk factors. Here I've highlighted the ones that focus on wealth. So you have the equity tool, which is a measure of relative poverty that's dividing your population into quintiles by their socioeconomic status. There's also the asset to income estimator, which is a complementary tool offered by the same agency, Metrics for Management, which allows you to connect measures of relative wealth to an absolute measure of poverty that's in dollars per capita. And another tool that people tend to like is the Progress Out of Poverty Index, which is the probability of somebody living in absolute poverty under $1.25 a day. So then we get to supply. And supply is where a lot of us focus our efforts, and a lot of the different sort of resources that are out there are concentrated. But first you want to know, what is the total size of the market? And that's market share. That's the metric we tend to use, and that's the total volume of the product on the market, including condoms that are distributed through the public, social marketing, and commercial sectors. And you can get that information in a number of ways, and you're going to have to bring it together, and it's not always clean. It can be a little messy, but you get your public sector distribution data. You need to be aware, because sometimes that is data on commodities that are pushed from central stores but not pulled from decentralized sites. So you want to really understand like what is out there on the market. Social marketers usually have data available, and DKT does a nice job of consolidating that information on an annual basis. We provide a link to that tool. The commercial sector sales data is hard to get. And a lot of times the commercial agencies don't want to relinquish that data. If you bring them into the decision making around TMA and they are a part of those bodies and a part of the effort to grow the market, you may be able to get them to give you that information. In some cases, you may need to use a proxy like procurement and supply chain data, or even like customs data. Related to that is the value of the market, and the value of the market is really just calculated by multiplying the volume by the average consumer price, and you back out the free condoms. I provide some resources on value as well. And there are also some other resources I wanted to bring to your attention. Nielsen data, when you do have commercial market data available. And then RHSC, the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition, hosts the Global Family Planning Visibility and Analytics Network. And this is a growing network, and it's consolidated several different working groups. And so the Global VAN, as it's called, is a really nice resource for getting you supply data. So that's definitely something worth checking out. Other supply-related questions are about product availability at different delivery points in the market, and the range of products that are on the market. So the types, the brands, the price points available, and at different delivery points. And so this is interesting because this really gets at that just availability. Availability is the metric, the degree to which condoms are present on the market. You could measure that by by market penetration, so that's the proportion of outlets with condoms, or you could look at it by coverage, the proportion of the geographic areas where condoms are available according to some predefined standards. I think coverage is better than penetration, because coverage is really putting the product where the population needs it. The sources of the data for this are, again, the commercial data, outlet surveys, and you may have a presentation today on some novel ways to do outlet surveys, but those are the hard ones. Those are the census of the outlets, trying to figure out what's out there. They can provide information on stock, prices, the number of brands, and stockouts. Some organizations have used things like lot quality assurance sampling to make those surveys manageable. I'm offering you a couple of resources that are available through some Gates-funded projects through FP Watch, and then more recently we've been working with them on the CM4FP project, which is an innovative project where the researchers have tried to connect the supply to the demand through the outlet surveys and the household surveys, and we're working on a platform for data visualization, and that will be forthcoming. You could look at public sector distribution data, because you probably have that available. And again, crowdsourcing is an option here as well, where you could dispatch people to go out into outlets and look at what's available on the market and provide you with the data. Some interesting tools that we've found, there's a Ushahidi tool, and Ushahidi comes from the Swahili word for testimony, and it is a platform that is available, and UNICEF has used it, PEPFAR's Dreams Project has used it, but it offers the potential to dispatch people out into a community to look at what is available. It's also important to know not just what's on the market, but how do people perceive availability? And do users actually perceive that products are available when and where they need them? This can be included in population-based surveys, including surveys among key populations. And I think this opens up a really interesting question, though, about what is true access. And I don't think this is something that we have really nailed as a sector. And this is where something like a population-based survey matched with an outlet survey would be helpful, because I think we narrowly define access as distance, usually, like, is somebody close to the product, as opposed to other things that could define access, like, is it the kind of outlet somebody wants to go to? Is it a quality outlet? Is it on their way to work? Is it available to them, not just at the distance from a house, but, is it the type of place that they would feel comfortable frequenting and getting the product? We used to ask at PSI, is the product behind the counter? Those sorts of things. So I think there's a lot of ways to ask about access, but, no better way than asking the consumers themselves, which is why we've listed here a qualitative insight as well. And last is this bucket of sustainability. So how much do national governments spend on condoms? And you could look at that from national expenditure data. The Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington in Seattle does an annual health expenditures report, and they actually even had a special publication under COVID to understand what kind of ruptures there were in spending on these sorts of programs in light of COVID. There's also the question beyond national governments, how much do international donors spend on condoms, and how much of the market is reliant upon subsidy, and what are the trends over time? And so the metric here is about donor funding, funds spent on prevention and funds spent on condoms. And there is, again, from IHME, there's an annual financing global health report, and that is about the bilateral and multilateral funds that go into supporting condom programs and other health programs. And then you could also get country-specific data available from donors in country if you couldn't find it from these third-party resources. And then you want to ultimately know how sustainable are markets. What is the health impact? And is the country reliant upon external subsidy to achieve impact and keep commodities on the market? And Man Global Health has landscaping tools available that are really helpful for this. And those tools, require people to sit down and work together, and there's a lot of data triangulation. But this is, obviously one of the long-term questions, bigger questions that we want to be able to answer. So I want to thank you for your time. Recognize that it's a lot of information, but don't worry, we do have the resource available for you with an explanation of each of these metrics, the key questions, and then the potential resources that you can use. And you can also contact me, Kim at databoom.us, if you have additional questions. I'd love to help. So have a great rest of the webinar. Thanks.
Okay, and a big thank you to Kim Longfield for joining us from afar. A lot of the approaches that Kim just described are very expensive to implement. They will provide very accurate and reliable information and data to make decisions, but they come at a cost, and that is largely driven by the cost of gathering and collecting data. So our next presentation really begins to get an understanding, how can we get more efficient and effective at outsourcing some of that data collection to regular people on the street. So we have Georgie Midgley, who has been with M4 Jam a new-ish organization since 2016. Georgie comes to M4Jam from the world of management strategy and leadership, and she's got a great approach that she'd like to share with us right now in terms of what they've learned from a global funded project looking at the accessibility of condoms as part of a program in South Africa. So Georgie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chris. And hello, everyone. Morning, afternoon, wherever you are. As Chris said, I'm Georgie Midgley. I'm the CEO of M4Jam, and I'm joined by my colleague, Richard Dunn, who will also maybe assist with some of the more technical questions, should there be any. And as Chris said, we are a technology company based in South Africa. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of who M4Jam is and what we're about, and then take you through a survey that we did for the Global Fund on condom access in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. So if we can go, sorry, next slide, thank you. So M4Jam is essentially a gig technology company that connects communities or organizations via, and the key here is a mobile device. Africa skipped the laptop generation. They went from nothing to this device in their hand, and we are using that to empower communities. And our main mission in life is to revolutionize the lives in Africa through technology. We believe, by giving individuals confidence and giving them dignity, we can provide hope. And I think that's a big part of what Money4Jam believes in. If I could just go through the solution, the overall solution of M4Jam, sorry, thank you. So we are all about crowdsourcing, similar to what Kim has spoken to about previously in the previous presentation. And what we essentially are is a tasking micro-jobbing platform that crowdsources information. We do this, like I said, number one, mobile devices. It is a web-based technology available on both smart and feature phones, whether it's a laptop, a tablet, or a normal mobile device, okay? And we use technology to access that crowd. What we do is we take a big task and we break it into smaller micro tasks, what we call them, in order to lower costs and ensure that we can reach that audience as fast as possible. We then allocate that task to a jobber. A jobber is an independent contractor that is registered on our platform. We can allocate a task to an individual, to a geographic location, to a demographic group, or to a specific skill set. So if you have this specific skill, you can see this particular task. Then underpinning what we have is a mobile wallet. We need that to build trust. That is how we incentivize our jobbers. And the great thing about having this mobile wallet is that you can then change behavior. Through incentives, you can guide and incentivize people. Again, you can't make anyone do anything, but you can put those incentives in place to try and guide that behavior. And from there now, you've got the jobber, you've got the task, it's allocated to them and they're paid. What does this lead to? It leads to the creation of fast and accurate data sets. And I think we are a data company at heart. We are about the privacy, the accuracy, and the security of that data. That is the heart of M4Jam. But our magic, what is our magic? We empower communities to get that information. So we are a data company, but our magic is the fact that we are there to try and create economic opportunities for as many people as possible. So what makes our solution different? We have 5 key things. It's around the purpose, crowdsourcing, digitization, scalability, and cost efficiency. On purpose, like I said, we are a purpose-led organization. We are about making a difference in the world. We are about having a social and economic impact. Sorry, can you go to the next slide? Thanks, Yanni. And if you have a look at our current stats in South Africa, we have just short of 1 million jobbers. We should be hitting 1 million jobbers next week, actually. And if you look at that, the type of jobbers we have, 90% are the youth, under the age of 35, 63% are unemployed, and 65% are female. I mean, there are a couple of other stats there, but you can have a look when you get it. But we are about having this purpose and getting to these communities. The next one, which is the key, is the crowdsourcing. So traditional methods are centralized. You put a job at a city center in South Africa, let's take Johannesburg. You then send out employees in cars, they stay in accommodation, they collect that data, move from place to place, come back and collate that information. Crowdsourcing provides a decentralized model. Sorry, are you struggling to hear me? I see a comment saying
I can hear you fine, Georgie, from this side.
Okay, sorry. I just saw there was a comment saying that I'm breaking up a bit. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't for everyone. So Crowdsourcing is about this decentralized model. So it is essentially putting the task out to the crowd in the area, whether it's rural or peri-urban, and sending that information back to the city center, and mobilizing the community in that area to execute on the task. And it's creating these fast, cost-effective, and efficient data sets. There is no wastage. It's like an Uber driver is only paid when the task is complete. When you have finished your ride, an Uber driver is paid. Similarly here, when the data has been collected, it's been validated, it's vetted, that it is accurate, it can form part of the data set, the jobber is paid. Therefore, there is no wastage. You only pay on correct, accurate data. The shared economy forms a massive part here. A lot of people have phones and a lot of people have time. So although we do target largely the unemployed in South Africa, we also focus on the underemployed. So it's about making use of individuals who've got the resources at hand and just need to maybe make that extra money or use it as a side hustle, as we say in SA. The next big thing is the growing of the communities that we can create, put money back into the ecosystems where they are generated, so people can earn money where they live. And COVID-19 added a huge dynamic when it came to crowdsourcing because we are able to implement COVID-19 restrictions. People don't have to travel. They don't have to leave their communities. They do not have to put themselves at risk by going in a taxi. You can actually leave your house, do your work, and come home again. So through COVID-19, we have found the uptake in crowdsourcing has been massive. Next slide, thanks. Then the digitization and integration of data. The key here is to take the clipboard methodology and digitize it on a tablet or device, a handheld device. It doesn't always have to be a tablet. Everything we build is specifically for mobile devices. And it's not about taking away jobs or it's making people more efficient, making them smarter. You still need those people, but make it that the accuracy levels are greater. So the point of digitizing is the speed of data processing. You're almost as close to real time as you can get. You're reducing the error rates from having a standardized structure and dashboard to collect that information. You're improving your data quality and it's cost effective because, as I say, you only pay when it's actually completed. And then once you've got that data, you can optimize your supply chain. You can reduce your order to delivery lead times, stock outs, and stock holdings, because you've now got that data to implement those decisions. So it all starts with the creation of this database to understand your access points. And this is not only relevant for condoms, we've done it for medicines that expire by activating healthcare workers or nurses in those communities. It doesn't have to be our jobbers on the ground doing it. We can activate your own crowd to go and collect that information. Okay. And then the last one is around cost efficiency and scalability. Next slide, thanks. So on a scalability side, we are not defined by geographic boundaries. Because we are digital, we are technology, we are agile, geography is not something that we have to worry about. Everyone who's got a mobile phone can get access to this. The other key thing is that everyone's got a mobile device in their hand. And that allows us, there's just a pop-up on the screen, allows, once you've got a mobile device and you've got one in your hand, it allows us to reach those hard-to-reach communities, those criminalized communities, those very rural-based communities that would have been very difficult to access previously. And also we're cost efficient, as we said, there's no wastage, we are outcomes-based, and we are about, ensuring that there's no investment in infrastructure, assets, and resources. We are tech-enabled and ensuring that you can try and maximize and become more efficient. Okay, so that's just about InfoJam. So now just onto the condom audit that we did for the Global Fund. Global Fund tasked us to do a condom audit in July 2019, and I'd like to just take you through some of the results there, as well as the challenges and outcomes and recommendations that we felt from that specific survey. So just as an overview, we were asked by Global Fund to find stock availability of Max and Maxima condoms in the KZN area. We were asked to find 250 secondary distribution sites, SDS sites, that they did not know where they were. They gave us a definition of what they looked like, but we didn't know where they were. We had a 4-month period to go and audit them on a monthly basis. And the interesting part was the first audit obviously took the longest because we had to find those sites in accordance with the definition provided by the Global Fund. And then every month put out that audit again. By the fourth month, because it became a regular activity and the jobbers became engaged, it took 2 to 3 days to collect that information. So that is the speed and the power of crowdsourcing. So just to give you some overview of what we found, so the next slide will show you some pictures of SDS sites. So this is the type of SDS sites that our jobbers went and visited. Everything from spaza shops, or what we call tuck shops, taverns, government buildings, etc. The next one will show the different dispensing systems, whether they're on the wall boxes, and at each of those locations, what they look like. And this is all gathered from a jobber on their mobile device at a point close to their house, okay? If you just look at some of so once we've collected that information, it gets mapped, it gets geomapped and geotagged. Each time it's out of stock, you'll see red, yellow, low stock, green, they've got good stock, and we geomap and geotag so they can see the history of each event. By the fourth one, they can click on it and see the history of each of those points over the last 4 months, and everything is wrapped around that specific point. They can see where the point is, photos of the place, contact information, and the previous, all the audit information linked to each individual point. Now we're going to look at the aggregated information. So from an SDS perspective, 47% of the SDS sites we mapped were tuck shops that we found that had previously stocked Max or Maxima condoms. 26% were taverns, and the balance were clinics, retailers, government buildings, community centers, and schools. When looking at the stock availability per SDS site, on the next slide, you'll see that so this, from a stock availability perspective, you can see that the stock out of stocks grew month on month, which was quite concerning. You can see from audit 1 to month 4, which is the black, you can see that that stock out has grown quite tremendously over the 4 months. And you can also see that the amount of condoms that were provided and stocked were generally in the 20 or less. There were very few places that had between 20 and 50 packs available in stock. When looking at each SDS site per out of stocks, you'll see the best were the schools and colleges. They had no stock outs over the 4-month period. Second best was clinics. You can see they only had a little bit. That green block is the 11% out of stock, with the worst being the taverns. There they had a green block of 58% out of stocks over the 4-month period, and followed by your government buildings, tuck shops, and let's say retailers were all around the 50% mark. So, great to see that the colleges and schools had condoms in stock, but there was definitely some area of concern. Okay. Interesting about the dispensing systems. So we had 3 key dispensing systems. The wall mounted, where you can see it's bolted on the wall, on the box, in a box, either on the countertop or wherever, somewhere in the SDS site. And the last one was just countertop, loose ones on top of the counter. The majority, 65%, were in boxes, and only 18% were wall mounted. So if you can go to the next one. So that's the high level data. So what were the conclusions that came out from the analytics? Number one, obviously the replenishment cycles were insufficient. Large out of stocks across all the SDS sites that we visited. Secondly was Max condoms, which are for males, and Maxima condoms, which were for females. We did find quite a bit of Max condoms, but the Maxima condoms were fairly unavailable. There weren't many that we did find. The next is that there was largely quite a small quantity available. As you saw in that one slide, there's many 20 or less. When in stock, it was a small quantity that was there. There were very few sites that had a large quantity available. 83% of the samples said that they had stocked Maxima before, but they had not been replenished. The next thing is that the government buildings, considering it was a government initiative, had very, very low stock. Particularly, 15% on Max condoms and 86% out of stock on the Maxima condoms. And lastly, which we found probably the most interesting, which was quite aligned to what Kim was saying, is that those that had the box dispensing system generally had stock, because either the box was hidden, it was unavailable, consumers couldn't necessarily see it. Whereas the wall mounting dispensing system were more likely to be out of stock because it had easier access for the individuals that needed a condom at the time. So the key challenges that we faced, or it could be if you face doing a similar survey as ours on the next slide, is number one is the language barrier. In South Africa, we have multiple local languages, and we also, when dealing particularly with, let's say, your spaza or your tuck shop owners, they're non-South Africans. So Dealing with that language barrier is always a challenge. The way we have overcome it in the past is either we like to use local people, so we have sourced from that area, so most of the time it isn't a problem, but where there is a language barrier, we actually convert our content into that language to assist in that communication. But English is generally the language that most people do understand. The next thing is ensuring that people have an adequate mobile device. It is about data. It is about making sure the photos are clear, the geotags are correct, and you need a reasonable device in order to do that. The key thing we do here is we actually screen our jobbers prior to this task to make sure they do have the adequate device and they actually have the ability to source the adequate device if necessary. Connectivity is key. In South Africa, we are 0 rated with one of the networks, which means our jobbers do not pay for data when on our site. But you know, that is always a concern. And luckily for us, we do have that in South Africa. But the other big thing is that connectivity is not always there. So you could be in a certain area where there is 0 connectivity. And the big solution here would be to create an offline mode so that data can be uploaded next time you have connectivity available. Technical capabilities and the skills of the jobbers is key. Again, it's about the data we collect. So we need to make sure that we're collecting the right data. And micro training modules are put on the platform. And jobbers can only unlock our tasks once that training has been completed to ensure that they are at the right standard and collecting the data to the quality at which we expect. External factors like xenophobia, weather conditions, political factors, they always come into play. And the last thing was identifying these SDS sites as per the Global Fund definition. The problem here was that these SDS sites had to have stocked maxima condoms in the past. So we found that the reason why it took quite long in the beginning was that we had to find, for every 10 sites our jobbers went to, only 1 met the definition. So it is quite hard to, when you've got such a blank canvas, to find these sites, but it's never impossible. And I think with crowdsourcing, it does unlock a lot of those opportunities. So our recommendations based on the survey were largely around 2 key things: awareness and distribution. So if you can just go into the next slide, thanks, Yanni. From an awareness perspective, because we can crowdsource, we can talk to the communities in the area. And we always say that if you're going to do an awareness campaign, the best thing to do is interview the individuals in that community prior to doing it, because we can gauge their knowledge, their understanding, and their opinions before educating. A one size does not fit all. What works in one location does not work in the location right next door to it. So it is about making sure that you talk the right message to the most relevant audience. And once you have that information, you can launch your awareness campaigns. And we said, especially on the maxima condoms, because there seem to be a need for it, but not a lot of communication and awareness around it. And lastly, because it's all geotagged, you can actually direct people to an SDS site. Similar to what Kim was saying, you know, I might not be comfortable going to get a condom at my school, but I'll be comfortable to fetch it on my way home at my local tavern. Okay, school tavern, maybe not the best example I could have used, you know, it is about directing them to a place where they are comfortable to collect a condom. And we are able to do that via our technology and technologies like ours. The next is distribution. So once you have mapped that distribution, it's identifying the gaps in that distribution, integrating it to a central warehouse management system, and then designing replenishment cycles to minimize these stock out events. And we can do that through 2 ways. One is through jobbers. So you can actually send a jobber in, and when they see stock is running low, they can do these demand triggers so that they can actually order stock to eliminate reduced or stock outs completely. The other way is to actually use your SDS owners and managers. So a policeman who's in that police station can actually see, oh, the condom's getting low, and actually just put a notification on their phone. It doesn't cost them anything, and it will trigger an order through to the warehouse management system so that they can be replenished for stock. So ultimately, you know, crowdsourcing fills a very different gap, I think. You know, like I said, we are all about data. It is at the heart of what we do, but we strongly believe that by crowdsourcing, you can not only collect that data that is so desperately needed to help guide people's decisions, but you can actually, like I say, our magic is empowering the communities to do it. Empower the people that live there to earn an income, to feed their family that day while getting your data. So that's Money for Jam in a nutshell. Yeah, and Richard and I are going to stay on the call, and yeah, we will address any questions that you may have.
Thanks so much, Georgie. Really rich presentation. And I just want to remind participants of the webinar to include your questions in the chat box, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end of the session, either during this recorded session, or we can make those responses available online as well. Okay, so innovation can take place in all different shapes and forms. And what Georgie has just presented is a highly innovative, technology-rich solution, but we also have an equally innovative approach with a low technology means that's been implemented in Kenya and Malawi. And what we'd like to do now is invite Japheth Kioko of the national program, who is a statistician and M&E expert. He brings extensive experience in statistical data analysis, management of health information systems, research, and HIV programming, and deploying polling booth surveys in key populations. Immediately following that presentation, we will have Josey, Kachiza, who works with World Vision as an M&E officer and has spent years working with adolescent girls and young women programs, and how they've deployed this very similar approach to provide immediate response to uptake in condom use with young women. So over to them to see innovation in a different light.
Thank you very much. My name is Japheth Kioko, as you have heard, and I work for NASCOP in Kenya. And NASCOP is a national. NASCOP is a unit within the Ministry of Health, which spearheads interventions on the fight against HIV in Kenya. And I will discuss more about the polling booth surveys, which we have done to measure behavior outcomes among the key populations in Kenya, especially the female sex workers and MSMs. And I will also give some bit of findings from the studies which have been able to do in the last, since 2014. Next. Yeah, so to give a quick background is that the major modes of transmission of HIV in Kenya is from heterosexual and homosexual relations. And this accounts for like 93.7% of all the HIV infections in Kenya from the amounts of transmission study which was done in 08. And of course, condom promotion and the use is one of the primary programmatic responses for combating the spread of HIV in Kenya. You realize that in Kenya, we have what we call the key populations drop-in centers, where key populations assess HIV prevention services, including condoms. And it has also been noted that correct and consistent condom use reduces HIV incidence by 80%. And of course, there is need to ensure high quality provision of condoms, which are readily available to the key populations at and their partners at the point where they need them, and especially at the hotspots. So in Kenya, basically, condom distribution is either direct or indirect. We have the direct distribution of condoms to key populations, which is done by the peer educators in the hotspots where they meet their peers and then distribute condoms based on need. And then we have also the indirect distribution of condoms where programs and also the peer educators place the condoms in dispensers and at some specific points where they are accessible by the client. So, and you realize that there's a lot of micro planning which happens by the peer educators where they ensure that they have lists of their peers whom they also develop their condom needs, and as such, they are able to know how many condoms, for example, in a period of 1 month, will a female sex worker require. And so their distribution is targeted based on that need, which is arrived at after the micro planning process. And next slide. So measuring condom use among the key populations in 2014, 2015, and 2017, Kenya has used the polling booth survey as a means of measuring behavior outcomes, especially on condom use among the key populations, because you take note that understanding condom use behavior among key populations is key, because condom is a key barrier to acquiring new HIV infections among the key populations. And again, in as much as the information about condom use behavior is very key, again, gathering information on condom use and other risky sexual behaviors becomes a little bit difficult because the information is very sensitive, the information is personal, the information, the KP feels it is very confidential. So if you really use the face-to-face interviews, then you are more likely to elicit responses which are socially desirable. And the most at times you find that the responses are underreported. So we have deployed the polling booth survey as a way of measuring the condom use behavior among the key populations, because from previous studies, it has been shown that polling booth surveys elicit more accurate responses for very sensitive information from the key population. And even in a key population in Kenya, they have really preferred the polling booth survey as a way of evaluating, or rather as a way of assessing behavior outcomes among the key populations. Of course, in those rounds of polling booth surveys, University of Manitoba has been providing technical support in conducting the polling booth surveys for the KP program in Kenya. And of course, much has been borrowed, especially in terms of implementation of PBS from India and Nigeria. And as you can see from that photo, this is a photo of a PBS report for the third round of PBS done in 2017. So I will zero in on the PBS method, and moving to the next slide. Yeah, so you realize that, as I've said, polling booth is a group interview method. So this is where participants come together in a group, and the groups are normally organized between 10 to 12 people. So in our mobilization and the selection of respondents, we group them so that then 10 people, 12 people join a group, and then that is called a group session. So you realize that we want it to be very confidential. We want it to be highly private for the participants. And so we need some materials. We make it like a polling booth, the way you go and do voting during national elections. This is a similar manner where we have the cartons, which is a removable box, which is accessed like booth. And then we have the boxes, which are three colors. We have the green, red, and white. And these are for dropping the responses, because they neither talk to each other nor do they talk to the moderator. So they drop their answers in those boxes, and their answers are basically in the form of cards. So we have cards from number 1 to the last. If we have 20 questions in our questionnaire, then we'll have number 1 to 20. And the respondent, the moderator, will read the questions from number 1 to the last. And when it is in question 1, the respondents will raise the card, and then they will read the question, and then they will drop the card based on the response. So if, for example, number 1, the response is yes, then the respondent will drop the card in the green box. If the answer is no, the respondent will drop the card into the red box. And if it is not applicable, the respondent will drop the card in the white box. Again, we have the reporting format. We have reporting for per group, so we don't have individual level reporting. So after the end of the session, we have the moderator and the assistant collecting all the green boxes, putting together all the red boxes, putting together, and all the white boxes, putting together, and then counting each card from those boxes. And then we report them in a reporting format, summarizes information by each group, so that then we get a sense of, from group 1, how many people said yes in question 1, how many people said no in question 1, and how many that question was applicable. And of course, we have total. So those are the key materials which are required whenever you are conducting a PBS. And I have said essentially the booth is to ensure that we have confidentiality, and even the spacing is such that the participants are not very close to each other. And so each participant feels a bit private, and is able to cast the vote in a private place. And even the results are not announced by individual, are not summarized by individual, but rather by group. Next. So looking at methods further, I've indicated that the members are separated from each other in a polling booth environment. As you can see, we have a box polling booth carton where each participant sits. And then we have the 3 boxes, which are initially at the start of the session, they are placed at the top. And the moderator also needs to check that they are empty, so that then as they begin to vote, then there is no card inside the box. The other thing is that the cards, each participant is given a stack of cards from number 1 to the last. And they raise the card whenever a question is read, so that the moderator gets to understand that that is moving together with the participants, and that the participant does not answer question 2. Actually, the question is for question 1. Next. Look, so this is a group interview session for female sex workers, and as you can see, we have the boxes placed in front of each of the FSWs, and then we have the participants raising the cards. You can see this is question number 23, and so as we said, you have to raise the card corresponding to the question which is being read. And if your answer is yes to question 23, for example, then you will drop your card number 23 into the green box, which is inside the ballot booth. And if your answer is no, you place the card in the red box. And if your answer is not applicable, sometimes you find it's not applicable, then you place that card in the white box. And then moving forward, there are those participants who may not want to respond. Probably they feel that they are neither yes, neither no, not applicable. So we advise them to put the card outside the polling carton, the polling booth, and so they don't insert in either of the 3 boxes. Next. So moving forward, the moderator has to explain the PBS method. It's very important that the participants get to understand that whatever information they provide or whatever responses they give will not be treated as at individual level, but rather at the group level. And we always advise before we start a group session, you need to give an example so that then they understand how the results, how the voting, or rather how the responding will be done, and how the results will be analyzed. So we give an example, and then we count, and then you start again with the first question in the questionnaire. And the questions are read one by one, and we always translate the questions so that we have questions translated in the local language, which is mostly in Swahili. So we have both English and Swahili, and we also have peer educators who are research assistants who also translate in the event that the key population member is not able to understand. And the researcher needs, when you are starting to make sure that the exercise is lively, you need to create some bit of rapport before starting. And then after you create the rapport, then the participants become more confident, and they are able to give the right answers. And we normally emphasize that questions need to be read slowly and explained very well, without, of course, diverting from the main question. And you repeat whenever it is important. And of course, sometimes you can give examples, and you use local terms where necessary. And we always say that you need to give sufficient time for the respondents to respond. And also, the research assistant, who is always from the community, sometimes is always moving around and checking if there's anybody who has difficulties in voting, and then they tell them how to vote without necessarily looking at where they are putting their ballot card. So this is a group session, and as you can see, and of course, we observe social distancing when we are conducting such polling booth surveys, especially the ones which have done under COVID. Next. Yeah, so again, and during the administration, at the end of the administering the questions, the researcher, the two of them, the moderator, the researcher, and the research assistants move around collecting the cards, or collecting the ballot boxes. They collect the ballot boxes separately, and you find that the greens are put together, the reds are put together, and the whites are put together. Then you remove, or you open the cards, like you can see in my left corner. The green boxes have been opened, and each specific number is put alone. Like you can see, number 4 is alone, number 39 is alone. And then you also do the same for the red, for the white. And then after you begin the counting process, and then you tally. So you realize number 1 from green was like 5, the nose from number 4 were 5, and so on. So you count each number alone in each color box, and then you report that in the summary tool. Next. So this is an example of the polling booth reporting, and I've said you can see the questions. Like we have a question on did your last client use a condom with you? So from the tallying, then from the green boxes, you find that that question had 10 as an example, and then from the red boxes, the card number 1s were 2, and there were not applicable and no answer. No answer is where said we keep aside. So the total always match the total number of participants in that session. So you count all the card numbers in all the in the green boxes and the red boxes and the white boxes, and then you report them here. And then eventually you will have a tally form which is consistent with the number of respondents in that session. Moving to the next slide. We have, of course, before we conduct PBS, we normally do random sampling of participants, and our sampling is normally probability-based sampling, and of course, it is multi-stage sampling. It is probability sampling because, one, we select participants from the hotspots. Hotspots are the areas where key populations congregate for risk behavior, and of course, and rejected behavior. So we do random selection of hotspots at the first level, and we do random selection of the participants at the second level. So we have 2 tiers in terms of selection, where we randomly pick hotspots because we cannot do all the hotspots. And then next stage is to pick individuals from those hotspots which have been randomized for participation in the study. As I noted earlier, a session normally has between 10 to 12 participants, and this is to ensure that there is not much of a crowding in a session with too many participants. And of course, most of the PBSs, most of the sessions are conducted in the areas which are near the hotspots where the key populations congregate. And the sessions per each of the hotspots is based on the sample size, because you find some hotspots are bigger than others. And so that is why we are saying it is probability-based sampling, because we select hotspots with a higher number of participants, key populations will have a higher number of respondents. Moving to the next. So why I choose PBS as opposed to other methods like face-to-face interviews? We have noted, and even from countries which have done this comparing face-to-face with polling booth, that in face-to-face interviews, face-to-face interviews tend to misreport risk behaviors, and especially in questions which are perceived to be too personal. And also participants in a face-to-face, especially key populations, facing them one-on-one to ask questions, like questions around whether they used condom in the last anal sex, or even whether they have experienced violence and things like that. Some of that information becomes too confidential, and the key populations will probably feel shy to give true information, and probably they may give you information which is wrong. So that is why a polling booth service come in handy, and they have tried to address these challenges of underreporting, especially of risk behaviors, because from such studies, it has been observed that participants in a polling booth survey give higher reporting of risky sexual behaviors, and also PBS has also ensured accuracy of the data which is collected, especially for the sensitive sexual behaviors. And also, it has also been of much use, especially in countries or in areas where resources are limited, because again, as you will note later, PBS is is a cost-effective way, because you group 10 participants at a go, and so you realize you will conduct less polling booth sessions. So looking at that chart on my right, this is a comparison of the face-to-face, where we have the blue showing results from the face-to-face interviews, and we have the polling booth findings. And as you can see, there seems to be a lot of reporting of close to 5 times, especially when you are comparing face-to-face and PBS. For example, on our question of ever taken an HIV test, we are having 2.6 compared to 6.8 who reported that they have ever taken an HIV test. Again, on the question of whether you have ever had sex with a woman, we also think that 6.9 against 20.3 when this was done via PBS. So from here, clearly, PBS is a more preferred method of conducting surveys, especially where much of the information is very sensitive, is very personal, and this especially when you are dealing with the key populations, much of information becomes very sensitive and very personal. Next.
Japheth, it's Kerry here. I was just wondering if we could perhaps skip some of the detailed findings just in the interest of time, and we can share that on email. But I would just like the Malawi colleagues to also have the opportunity to share their experience.
Okay, that's fine. So I can briefly do some few slides on the results, and as you can see from here, condom use in paid partnerships, and I think as you can see, we are seeing some rising trends in condom use among FSW and MSM. Next. And again, condom use in regular partnerships is lower and remain the same across the trends. Again, as you can see, compared to paid partnerships, condom use in regular partnerships is a bit lower, and but still looks a bit higher among the MSM. Next. So inconsistency in condom use, we look at whether the key populations have had an occasion of unprotected sex. And I think as you can see from here, we are seeing some improvements. Less and less key population are having unprotected sex. Moving to the next slide, we have availability of issues of condom availability, and we also have issues to do with whether clients did not use condoms because of issues of money, and as you can see the findings there. Moving to the next slide, we also have questions around condom bus and the slippage, and again, as you can see, we seem to be doing. I mean, seems to be some significant changes, especially when it comes to condom efficacy, because we are seeing less and less condom bus among the key populations in Kenya from the polling booth survey findings. Next. Yeah, so just briefly on the limitations of the PBS, one is that because it's a grouped interview method, then we are not able to do much of correlations because the information cannot be linked. So we can't do relationships analysis. And again, the method, as you have seen, is either yes or no, or not applicable. And so you realize that the responses are limited to only 2 options of yes and no. And then the information, sometimes we don't want to stretch the questionnaire so much because we are dealing with key populations who sometimes lose patience. And so we normally limit our questions so that we have few questions in our PBS sessions. Next. Yeah, so in terms of the advantages, as I've said, it can be done fairly quickly because 10 people or 12 people at a time. It uses less resources because, of course, we are having 10 people at a time. So the people who are administering the interviews would be less. And in terms of data management, it is a bit easy because we normally enter our data into Access and then we export to SPSS, and the questions are yes and no, so analysis becomes a little bit easy. And of course, the findings for the program, the analysis, we normally give feedback at the point when we are doing the sessions. And so it becomes easy even for programs to know where they have programmatic gaps. And of course, as findings are available immediately, the researchers can probe and understand reasons behind certain results, and of course, do any referral or provide any other education as might be needed. Next. Yeah, so thanks, and I will welcome the next presenter to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Japheth, for that comprehensive presentation. Really rich insights to draw from. And again, we will be making any questions that you have available online after this workshop. But over to Josey, who's going to present the experience of polling bureau surveys with a different population, AGYW in Malawi. If we could, Josey, quite quickly get through this presentation so we at least have a little bit of time for questions at the end. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much, and I hope you can hear me. So this is Josey Kachiza, working with World Vision, Malawi. So Kioko has just exactly said the process of conducting PPS. We have just done one for World Vision and AGYW. So I will skip the process because he has exactly said how we do PPS in terms of the approach and the methodology. So just to begin with, as World Vision, we only have one-time experience doing PPS. We have just done it last month. We started around July and we finished around 5 August. So what we are presenting here, they are not final results. They are more like the progress reporting, because the final results of the survey hasn't been shared yet. So the survey was we as World Vision, we were supporting the survey here in Malawi, but then University of Manitoba is the one that was leading the exercise. So the data that was collected was shared to University of Manitoba to do the final analysis, but then you have access to the response that were given and also the processes. So like for Malawi, we were looking at AGYW as a key population, where we call adolescent girls and young women, and the focus was to measure the program outcome and also understand safe access barriers to AGYW in global funded districts. So we are only focusing on the districts that are implementing AGYW in Malawi. So we are looking at Lilongwe, Mulanje, Cholo, and Mangoji. So these are the only districts that we did the PPS. So it wasn't for the entire country, and the specific objective was to focus on the sexual behaviors and also structure outcomes data for AGYW programs in 2-time period. So what we were looking at is, first of all, what we have done, we are regarding as the baseline. Then we are hoping that we would also do another assessment after interventions to see if there have been any behavior changes, and also want to understand barriers and also challenges experienced by AGYWs in accessing the HIV program. So next. So the study that has been done in terms of the methodology, like that has been said by Kioko, we also employed the two approaches. We are doing the PPS and also the FGD. The reason why we did PPS has been explained, that we are looking at this as the sensitive study. Excuse me. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hi, Josey. Go ahead, please. I think there was somebody unmuted.
All right, thanks. All right, so yeah, so we did a mixed approach, including the qualitative and the quantitative. On the quantitative, we are looking at the PPS itself, and then on the qualitative, we were looking at the FGD. So in terms of the inclusion criteria, we were focusing on the AGYWs aged between 15 to 24, but then we had to categorize them, those of 15 to 17 as separate category, and then those of 18 to 24 as also separate category. And then we were looking at those that are residing in the target districts, like I said, the 4 districts that are implementing global funded AGYW project. So next. So in terms of sampling, first of all, we are looking at a purposive sampling, because we are looking at only those districts that are implementing AGYW. But in those districts, now we had to list villages and towns, all the villages and towns, and then we had to do a systematic random sampling according to the number of PBS sessions that we are supposed to do. So like I said, University of Manitoba is the one that guides us in terms of number of sessions that we are supposed to do per district. Let's say like for Cholo, we were supposed to do 16 sessions. So we had to divide 16 sessions by the total number of villages that are there to determine the sampling interval. So after we have done that, then now we would also select the type of the age category that we are supposed to engage that particular sampled village. So we did this process to identify to sample the villages, and also to identify the AGYWs that we are supposed to interview in the PBS and also the FGD. So for the FGD, just to mention, we were targeting 1 per district. So for the 4 districts, we had 4 FGDs. 2 were for the 15 to 17, and the other 2 were for 8 to 24. So in total, but in total, as a study, we had around 86 PPS and then 4 FGDs that was conducted. Next. So in terms of mobilizing the AGYWs, as World Vision, we have implementing partners, which we call them as sub-recipients for the grant. So like I said, in the 4 districts, for the Lilongwe, we have Plan Malawi that was supporting mobilization of the AGYWs. In Mulanje, we had Janet. In Cholo, we had Pakachere. Or in Mangochi, we had Action Aid. So these are the implementing partners that helps in mobilizing AGYWs. But before then, through the University of Manitoba technical support, we had to go through a 3 days orientation just to understand the overview of the assessment and how the methodology and the sampling is supposed to be done, and also the mobilization. So these people were capacitated in how they should do the mobilization, following which now we commenced the actual assessment on the 9th July with Lilongwe. So the participants in this exercise, the participation was voluntary, and also the consent forms were given to them, and they were also briefed on how the assessment is supposed to be done, and also how the results will be of importance in terms of programming and also decision making. So the consent forms were, I can say, they were in 2 categories. For those that were of age between 15 to 17, the consent form was sent through their guardians and parents. While for those that are of 18 to 24, the consent form were administered to them, but then they were not allowed to sign anywhere for confidentiality purposes, because we didn't want them to write their name anywhere, as Kioko has said. But then they were just informed about the consent. Then the moderator was the one assigning on their behalf. Next. So maybe this is just the list of key tools that were used. Like I mentioned, we had the consent form, then we had the AGYW respondent screening tool. The screening tool was just looking at the eligibility of the participants, because we are looking at those that are of AGYW category and those that are coming from the target districts. And then we had the actual PBS questionnaire that was translated into local language. In our case, it was in Chichewa. Then you had the demographic and talent sheet form, the one that Kioko has also demonstrated, the one that we tallied the results from the responses. Then you had the FGD guide, and also then the digital recorder and the note just to record the responses from the FGD. Next. So this is just the number of AGYWs participated by age and also by districts. For the age of 15 to 17, the overall target was 368, but then we managed to reach 367, that's 99%. For the 18 to 24, we reached 68 out of 688, and overall we reached 1047 out of the target of 1056. That's 99%. And you can see below the breakdown per district, you'll see that Mangochi and Cholo, we managed to reach 100% of the sample size in all the age category. While for Lilongwe and Mulanje, the reach was varying. And in overall, you'd see that for Lilongwe, we reached 97%, while in Mulanje, we also reached 97%. So this is just the reach in terms of AGYW that participated in the assessment. Next. So we just wanted to share the responses, focusing on the condom use related questions. But like I said, these are just progress results. Though we have done the exercise, but then the final analysis hasn't been shared yet. We just got an email today from our colleagues from University of Manitoba that the final results should be shared by 5th of September. So we're looking forward to that. But then these are just responses we got, and then they were tabulated in online database that was created by University of Manitoba. So you can just appreciate the responses on the condom-related questions. Then you can discuss from there. Next. So you'd see this one is in the PBS, we had 42 questions, and like Yogo was presenting, each question was presented by a card number. So when we look at Q8, that's question number 8, and it was bearing card number 8 as the one to be used when responding to this question. So it's asking the last time you had sex with a person, did you use a condom? So you'd see the responses varying per district, but then you'd see that I mean they are varying per district and also by age category, but you would see that in most cases, those below 18 are the ones that are reporting less than those that are above 18 in terms of maybe let's say for the long, you'd see that around 44% they did not use a condom during the lesson 36, and you see the same for Mangochi, Mulanje, and also Chol. Next. And now from question 8, we skip to question number 11, which asks, which is also a condom-related question. The last time you had sex with a non-marital or non-cohabiting partner within the last 12 months, did you use a condom? So you would also see that the responses are varying per distance or per age. But looking at the responses, you see that from my analysis, it looks at those of 15 to 17 are the ones that seem to be vulnerable in terms of condom usage. And next. That's question number 13. During the past 12 months, were there a time when you intend to use a condom with any of your sexual partner, but did not use because the condom was not available at the time and place? So you would also see the response varying, but still those of 17 to 18 are the ones that seems to be vulnerable in terms of condom usage. Next. So that's question number 14. During the past 12 months, was there a time when you wanted to use a condom during sex with any of your sexual partner, but did not use because the sexual partner did not want to wear a condom? So you would see they are varying, and Cholo is registering almost 100% that scenario was occurred, but still at the same age category, 15 to 17. From my just brief analysis, I would say that maybe these results are maybe because of lack of maybe negotiating powers among those of 15 to 17. Also, maybe they are also scared of accessing the condoms providing services. But then I think we can still explain these results when you have the final analysis. Next. So PBX experience, like we have said, we have just done this one time. But like what my colleague from my colleague Kioko has said, I think it's easy to administer among the AGYWs with low trust because they don't answer the questions individually. They're not given the questionnaire. So it's just a moderator reading out the questions, just making sure that the question is very clear to them, and then they just cast their vote in the ballot boxes. Then we're also saying participants felt a sense of confidentiality, making it easier for them to respond to such sensitive questions, like it has been said. That because of the confidential part of it, I think PBS is able to produce reliable results because of the trust that is there. And then it also avoids acceleration of condom use, as participants do not feel judged because of the same element of confidentiality. So I think next. Yeah, so that's just a picture on one of the PBS that was conducted in Mulanje. That was a session in progress. As you can see, this is the setup of the PBS, and those are the containers that Kioko was referring to. So from our end, like I've said, we have achieved 99% of the sample size. I think that's the end of the presentation. So I was rushing because of time, and also because most of the things that I was supposed to say have also already been presented by Kioko. Thank you very much. If
Thank you so much.
My colleague Edwin can come in. I see Edwin was also on this call. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Josey, and the other presenters presenting their perspective and experiences today. So some really interesting approaches to understanding condom use behaviors and factors of those behaviors, as well as the crowdsourcing technique that M4Jam presented. And initially that overarching overview presented by Kim Longfield. I'm hopeful to the participants today that these presentations were helpful. They certainly were for me in understanding what is possible, and that we don't always need to go to the most expensive or cumbersome a way to monitor and evaluate condom programming, that there are other alternatives available to complement or enhance traditional methods. Thank you all for joining this call. Thank you to the presenters for taking the time to put together these presentations and sharing your experiences. I would just like to add that if you do have additional follow-on questions, please do write back to the South to South Learning Network, and we'll be sure to get back to you. This is not just some broad anonymous network, but real people behind this that are committed and dedicated to supporting your efforts. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Carrie to provide some closing remarks. So thank you all.
Thanks so much, Chris, and apologies, colleagues, for not having enough time and space for further discussions. I think everybody on this call knows that the South-South Learning Network is an available forum for further engagement, and we would by all means like to facilitate further discussion, so we certainly can do so. As we conclude this webinar, I really do just want to express my sincere appreciation to everybody for joining this call today. I think we all know condoms are an inexpensive and cost-effective prevention intervention, and I think we all appreciate how critical it is to understand dynamics and data on the total market. But I think we came together today because we know that monitoring is not easy, not always adequately funded, and sometimes not routinized. I think we also recognize across the board that we face gaps in country condom market intelligence. And so my hope today is that through this webinar, you may have been prompted to re-engage or rethink monitoring of your condom programs, and maybe even consider one of the methods that was shared with you today. So I really want to thank Kim for prompting us to think about the very many data components of condom programs, and also for sharing this really rich repository of market intelligence resources with us. I did share it in the chat, and we'll also share it on email. I want to appreciate Georgie and the M4Jam team for telling us about crowdsourcing and also sharing the case study of your experience in South Africa. And then it was really wonderful to hear from Kenya and Malawi on the use and experience of the polling booth survey. And although it's quite kind of novel and new to being used in these countries, I think it's something that, of course, can be expanded even beyond monitoring condom indicators, and is something that programs can think of more generally. And Chris, thanks for guiding and leading us through this session. So yeah, the South-South Learning Network commits to continuing our role in supporting member countries on this call to share learnings, as well as continuing these discussions to see if they can feed into TA requests or capacity building plans, or any of the other kind of options and channels that the South-South Learning Network makes available to the network countries. So with those few words, I just want to thank you for your participation. And I would like to ask if you would kindly please spend a minute before you actually hang up on this call. We have a very short poll just to gather your feedback on the session from today. So colleagues, please kindly do that, and we will commit to responding to all the questions in writing, along with sharing the presentations and resources. So thanks once more, and everybody keep well. Signing off.
Carrie, the poll has disappeared.
Sorry, we're working on it. Please, Karabo, if you can relaunch.
Hello, Jones. I don't know if you can hear me, but I think I'm not able to get the discussion. Maybe I might lost connection, or maybe something's happening. Can you still hear me?
Hi, Josey.
Josey, we can.
Hi,
sorry,
yes,
go
we
ahead.
can. Mhm.
Josey, we have come to the end of the session and there is a poll happening for the participants and everybody can leave after the poll. That is where we are, Josey.